You wake up every morning convinced that you are you, that somewhere inside your skull, behind your eyes, there's a you, a center of command, a captain at the helm, the thing that makes decisions, holds memories, feels emotions, your consciousness. But what if I told you that Richard Feynman, one of the most brilliant physicists who ever lived, looked at this belief and said, "It's an illusion. What if the place you think your consciousness lives doesn't actually exist? And what if the real location of what you call you is so strange, so uncomfortable, that it challenges everything you believe about being human?" Think about it. Right now, you feel like you're reading these words. You are doing it. There's a sense of being present, of experiencing this moment from a specific point of view. When you make a choice, when you decide to keep reading or to stop, it feels like that decision comes from somewhere. From you. From that central command station in your head. We've built entire philosophies, religions, legal systems around this feeling. The idea that there's a coherent, unified self-making choices and experiencing the world. But Feynman spent his life taking things apart, looking at how they really work beneath our intuitive understanding. And when he looked at consciousness, at the brain, at the physics of what we are, he found something deeply unsettling, something that makes the comfortable story we tell ourselves fall apart. You see, we like to think of ourselves as captains steering a ship, one unified entity in control. But the more Feynman explored the actual mechanisms, the actual physics of neurons and signals and quantum processes, the more he realized there is no captain, there is no central you. There's just the ship, doing what ships do, and the illusion that someone is steering it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The question isn't where your consciousness lives. The question is whether it exists at all in the way you think it does. And Feynman's answer will disturb you. Because if he's right, everything you think you know about being you is wrong. Have you ever really stopped to ask yourself where you are? I mean really, physically. Where is the thing experiencing your life? Most people, if pressed, would point somewhere behind their eyes, maybe toward the center of their head. That's where it feels like you are, right? When you look out at the world, it's as if you're sitting in a theater somewhere in your skull, watching a movie projected from your eyes, listening to sounds piped in through your ears. The folk understanding, the common sense view, is that your consciousness is located in your brain. Specifically, maybe in some central processing area. The frontal cortex, perhaps, the place where decisions get made. But here's the problem. When neuroscientists actually go looking for this place, this command center where you supposedly live, they can't find it. They can find areas responsible for language, for motor control, for processing visual information, for emotions, for memory. They can map out which parts of the brain do what with incredible precision. But there's no central seat of consciousness, no single location where everything comes together and a unified you experiences it. Instead, what they find is more like a committee. Thousands, millions, billions of tiny processes happening in parallel. Different parts of your brain processing different aspects of reality, often without any awareness of what the other parts are doing. Your visual cortex is building a picture of the world. Your auditory cortex is processing sounds. Your limbic system is generating emotional responses. Your prefrontal cortex is running simulations and making predictions. But there's no central office where all these reports get sent, and a single executive reads them and makes a decision. There's just the reports, talking to each other, influencing each other, creating patterns that ripple through the whole system. Feynman understood this at a level most people never reach, because he didn't just think about consciousness philosophically. He thought about it physically, mechanically. What is a brain, really? It's about 86 billion neurons, each one a tiny biological machine, firing or not firing based on the electrochemical signals it receives from other neurons. Each neuron is connected to thousands of others. They form an unimaginably complex network. And when you think a thought, when you make a decision, when you feel an emotion, what's actually happening is that patterns of electrical activity are flowing through this network. Specific pathways light up. Specific chemicals get released. It's all perfectly physical, perfectly mechanical. There's no ghost in the machine. There's just the machine. And here's where it gets really strange. Feynman would ask, when does a pattern of neural firing become consciousness? At what point does the electrochemical activity in your brain transform into the subjective experience of being you? Is it when a certain number of neurons fire in a certain pattern? Is there a threshold, a specific configuration? And if so, what's so special about that configuration? Why should pushing electrons around in meat create the feeling of being someone? This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. And Feynman looked at it and said, essentially, you're asking the wrong question. You're assuming there's a thing called consciousness that needs to be explained. But what if there isn't? Leave your answer in the comments below. Tell me, do you think consciousness is real, or is it just an illusion created by the brain? Is there really a you in there, or just a biological machine convincing itself it's someone? I'm genuinely curious what you think. And while you're down there, check out the pinned comment for additional resources on Feynman's most mind-bending ideas. Now, let's dig deeper into what Feynman actually discovered. To understand where Feynman's insight comes from, we need to start with how he thought about everything. Feynman had this incredible ability to strip away comforting stories and look at what was actually happening at the most fundamental level. He didn't trust intuition. He didn't trust common sense. He trusted mathematics and experiment. When he looked at something, he always asked, what are the actual physical processes at work here? What's really going on beneath the surface? And when he turned this approach to the brain, to consciousness, he started with the most basic question: what is thinking physically? Let's go back to the 1940s and 50s, when Feynman was doing his revolutionary work on quantum mechanics. He was at Princeton, working with John Wheeler, developing what would become quantum electrodynamics. But even then, Feynman was fascinated by the brain. He knew that whatever consciousness was, it had to be consistent with physics. It couldn't be magic. It couldn't violate physical law. So if you want to understand consciousness, you have to understand the physics of neurons. And neurons, at their most basic, are just switches. They receive inputs, electrochemical signals from other neurons. If the sum of those inputs crosses a certain threshold, the neuron fires, sending its own signal down its axon to all the neurons it's connected to. If the sum doesn't cross the threshold, it doesn't fire. On or off, 1 or 0. It's digital in a sense. Now, here's what Feynman realized. When you think about anything, when you have any experience at all, what's happening is that billions of these switches are flipping in incredibly complex patterns. Let's say you're looking at a red apple. Light hits your retina. Photoreceptor cells convert that light into electrical signals. Those signals travel down the optic nerve to your visual cortex, which is at the back of your brain. There, different neurons respond to different features. Some neurons fire only when they detect edges at certain angles. Others fire for specific colors. Others for motion. Others for specific shapes. The pattern of firing neurons encodes information about the apple. But here's the key. At no point does that information get sent to a central location where you look at it and experience it. Instead, the pattern itself is the experience. The distributed firing of millions of neurons, each doing its tiny mechanical job, creates the sensation of seeing red. of perceiving an apple. Feynman would draw this out. He'd show you that if you zoom in far enough, there's no mystery. There's just physics. Photons hitting retinal cells, triggering chemical reactions, opening ion channels, generating electrical potentials, propagating down nerve fibers, crossing synapses by releasing neurotransmitter molecules, binding to receptors, causing the next neuron to fire or not fire. It's all chemistry and electricity. There's no point where the physical process becomes something else, something non-physical called consciousness. The physical process is the consciousness. The pattern of neural firing is the experience. There's no separate thing experiencing it. The experience and the physical pattern are the same thing described in different languages. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because if Feynman is right, if consciousness is just patterns of neural activity, then where exactly are you? You see, we feel like consciousness is unified. When you look at that red apple, you don't experience it as millions of separate computations. You experience it as a single unified perception. You see the apple, one thing, experienced by one you. But the physical reality is millions of separate processes happening in different parts of your brain with no central coordinator. So how does the unified feeling arise? Feynman's answer, the answer that emerges from the physics, is that it doesn't. Not really. The unity is an illusion. A very convincing illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. Let me give you an analogy Feynman might have used. Think about a flock of birds. Thousands of starlings, swooping and diving in perfect synchronization, creating these beautiful, flowing patterns in the sky. It looks like the flock is a single entity, moving with intention and purpose. But zoom in. Look at each individual bird. Each one is just following simple rules. Stay close to your neighbors. Match their speed. Avoid collisions. No bird knows the overall pattern. No bird is directing the flock. There's no bird consciousness that experiences being the flock. There's just thousands of birds, each following local rules, and the emergent pattern looks like unified, purposeful behavior. Your brain works the same way. Billions of neurons, each following simple electrochemical rules, creating patterns that look and feel like a unified consciousness. But there's no actual unity. There's no central experiencer. There's just the pattern, and the pattern includes the feeling that there's someone experiencing it. Now, you might object. You might say, but I feel like I'm making decisions. When I choose to reach for that apple, that choice comes from me, from my consciousness, doesn't it? Feynman would smile and say, let's look at what actually happens. Experiments have shown, famously ones done by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s, that your brain shows activity related to a decision several hundred milliseconds before you're consciously aware of making the decision. The physical process that leads to reaching for the apple starts before you feel like you've decided to reach for it. What you experience as making a choice is actually your brain reporting to itself, after the fact, that a choice has been made. The decision doesn't come from your consciousness. Your consciousness is more like a narrator, telling you a story about what your brain is doing, making it feel like you're in control when really the control is an illusion. Feynman encountered this himself. He loved doing experiments on his own consciousness. He would lie in sensory deprivation tanks, trying to observe the process of thinking. He would catch himself in moments of decision and try to trace back where the decision came from. And what he found was deeply strange. He couldn't find the source. Thoughts would just appear. Decisions would just happen. And then, a moment later, his consciousness would claim credit for them, would weave them into a narrative where he, Richard Feynman, the unified self, had thought the thought and made the decision. But if he paid very close attention, he could see that the thought came first. and the sense of ownership came second. The consciousness was tagging along, narrating, not driving. And if you go even deeper, to the quantum level, things get even stranger. Feynman won his Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics for understanding how particles and fields interact at the most fundamental level. And at that level, determinism breaks down. Quantum mechanics is probabilistic. An electron doesn't have a definite position until you measure it. A particle can be in multiple states simultaneously until something forces it to choose. The future is not predetermined at the quantum level. It's genuinely open, genuinely random in a deep sense. Now, your brain is made of particles. The electrochemical signals in your neurons involve the movement of ions, of electrons. Quantum effects happen in your brain. They have to. You can't escape quantum mechanics. And if quantum mechanics is fundamentally random, then the processes in your brain that create what you call consciousness are also, at some level, random. Not caused by you. Not determined by your will. Just the probabilistic dance of quantum fields, filtered up through chemistry and biology into the patterns we call thoughts and decisions. So where does that leave consciousness? Where does it leave you? Feynman's answer, uncomfortable as it is that consciousness doesn't exist in a place. It doesn't have a location. It's not a thing. It's a process, a pattern, an emergent property of billions of neurons firing in sync. And more than that, it's an illusion that the system creates for itself. Your brain generates a model of the world, and part of that model is a model of itself. It creates a simplified representation, a character in its own story, and calls that character you. That character feels like it has unity, persistence, agency. It feels like it makes decisions and experiences the world. But that's just the story. The reality beneath is just neurons, just chemistry, just physics. The universe doing what the universe does, with no one at the center experiencing it. Or more accurately, with the experience being just another pattern in the universal dance of particles and fields, no more special or separate than anything else. This is what Feynman discovered about consciousness. And you won't like it because it means everything you think you are, everything that feels most intimately and undeniably real, is in a sense not real at all. It's a useful fiction your brain tells itself. And once you see that, once you really understand it, the question becomes, who is seeing it? Who is understanding? And the answer Feynman would give is, no one. The understanding is just another pattern, another process, another wave in the ocean, convinced for a moment that it's separate from the water. Now, let's go deeper into what this means. Because if Feynman is right, if consciousness is just a pattern of neural activity with no central experiencer, then we have to rethink almost everything about what it means to be human. Let's start with memory, because memory is crucial to our sense of self. You feel like you're the same person you were yesterday, last year, in childhood, because you have memories connecting all those moments. You remember your past, and that creates a sense of continuity. But what is memory? Physically, when you remember something, what's happening in your brain is that a specific pattern of neural connections is being reactivated. Let's say you're remembering your 10th birthday. At the time of your 10th birthday, certain experiences created certain patterns of neural firing. Those patterns caused physical changes in your brain. Synapses strengthened. New connections formed. Proteins were synthesized. The structure of your brain was altered to encode information about that experience. Now, years later, when you remember it, your brain is reconstructing that pattern. It's not playing back a recording. It's rebuilding the pattern from the structural changes that were made. And here's the thing. Every time you remember something, you change it. The act of remembering modifies the synaptic connections. So the memory you have today of your 10th birthday is not the same as the memory you had a year ago. It's been reconstructed and re-encoded multiple times, each time changing slightly. Feynman would point out that this means your memories are not a reliable record of your past. They're a constantly evolving reconstruction, modified by every recall, contaminated by other experiences, shaped by your current emotional state and beliefs. The story you tell yourself about who you are, based on your memories, is not a faithful history. It's a narrative constructed from unreliable fragments, stitched together to create the illusion of continuity. And if your memories are unreliable, if the story of your past is constantly being rewritten, then in what sense are you the same person who had those experiences? The physical matter of your brain has almost completely turned over in the past 7 years. The neurons are mostly the same, but the molecules they're made of have been replaced. The pattern has some continuity, but it's not the same pattern. It's like a river. The water flowing past you now is not the same water that flowed past a moment ago, but we still call it the same river. Are you like that? A pattern with temporary continuity, but no essential, unchanging self? And here's where Feynman's perspective becomes really profound. He would say that not only is consciousness not located in a specific place, it's not even located in a specific time. Think about it. Your experience right now feels immediate, feels like it's happening now. But we know from neuroscience that there's a delay. By the time you're conscious of seeing something, of hearing something, of feeling something, hundreds of milliseconds have passed since the sensory input arrived. Your brain takes time to process information, to construct the experience. So the now you're experiencing is actually the recent past. Your consciousness is always lagging behind reality, living in a constructed model that's slightly out of date. The you that feels like it exists right now is actually a memory of processes that happened a fraction of a second ago. You're always remembering yourself, never actually living in the present moment. Because by the time you're conscious of the moment, it's already gone. Feynman loved to think about time. His diagrams, the famous Feynman diagrams that revolutionized particle physics, treat time as just another dimension, no different in kind from space. A particle can move forward in time or backward in time in his equations. Causality emerges from the math, but it's not fundamental. Time, at the quantum level, is just a parameter. It doesn't flow. There's no privileged moment called now. The universe, in a sense, just is, a four-dimensional structure where all moments exist simultaneously. And our experience of time passing, of there being a now that moves from past to future, is an illusion created by the way our brains process information. We remember the past, but not the future, so we feel like we're moving from one to the other. But that's just how entropy works in our brains. It's not a fundamental feature of reality. So if time is an illusion and consciousness exists in time, experiencing a flow from past to future, then consciousness itself is part of the illusion. Your sense of being a continuous self, persisting through time, making decisions, and experiencing life is a story told by a pattern of neural activity that interprets a static four-dimensional universe as a dynamic three-dimensional movie. You're not traveling through time. You're a four-dimensional structure in space-time. And the part of that structure that is your brain at each moment contains processes that create the feeling of traveling through time. But there's no actual traveler. There's just the four-dimensional object that is you across your entire life. And different temporal slices of that object contain neural states that feel like they're distinct moments of consciousness, connected by memory. This sounds abstract, I know, but Feynman could make it concrete. He'd talk about his work on quantum electrodynamics, about how an electron can take every possible path from point A to point B simultaneously, and the path you observe is the sum of all those possibilities. He'd talk about how particles don't have definite properties until they interact with something, how the act of measurement creates the reality we observe. And he'd extend this to consciousness. Your brain, he'd say, is constantly making measurements of itself and the world around it. Those measurements collapse quantum possibilities into specific neural states, and those neural states create the experience of being someone, of being you. But the someone, the you, is just the result of the measurement. Before the brain measures itself, in a sense, you don't exist. You come into existence moment by moment as the brain creates a model of its own state and calls that model consciousness. Now, this gets really strange when you think about continuity of consciousness. You go to sleep every night. For hours, you're unconscious. Dreamless sleep, where there's no experience at all. And then you wake up, and you feel like you're the same person who went to sleep. But are you? What connects the you who went to sleep to the you who woke up? It's not continuous experience. The experience was interrupted. It's memory. Your brain encodes information about its state before sleep, and when you wake up, it reconstructs that information and creates the feeling that you're the same person. But what if the reconstruction is imperfect? What if some information is lost? People with amnesia can wake up not knowing who they are. The continuity is broken, and they feel like different people, because the story that connects past to present is gone. So are they different people? Or is personal identity itself just the story, just the memory? And when the memory goes, the person goes, even though the body and brain remain. Feynman would push this further. He'd ask, what if you went into a teleporter? What if a machine scanned every particle in your body, recorded its position and state, then disassembled you, sent the information to Mars, and rebuilt you there, particle by particle, exactly as you were? Would the person who stepped out on Mars be you? They'd have all your memories. They'd think they were you. They'd have identical neural patterns, but every particle would be different. Are you the pattern or the particles? And if you're the pattern, then you were never really you to begin with, because patterns are abstract. They don't have locations. They don't have selves. They're just information, instantiated in matter. And information can be copied, can be destroyed, can be transferred. It doesn't have the unity or persistence we attribute to consciousness. In fact, this happens naturally in a slower way. As I mentioned, your body replaces its atoms over time. The carbon atoms in your neurons today are not the same carbon atoms that were there 10 years ago. You've eaten food, breathed air. The atoms in your food and air have been incorporated into your body, and the old atoms have been excreted or exhaled. You're already not made of the same stuff. You're a pattern that maintains itself by constantly rebuilding using new materials. So if you can be you despite being made of different atoms, then you're not your atoms. You're the pattern. And patterns don't exist in places. They don't have locations in space. A melody exists in time, not in space. You can play it on a piano, a guitar, a voice, and it's the same melody. The pattern is the same even though the physical instantiation is different. Consciousness, Feynman would say, is like that. It's a pattern that can be instantiated in neural matter, but it's not identical to the matter. It's the relationship between the parts, the process, the dynamic flow of information. And that pattern doesn't exist in your head, or in your brain, or anywhere really. It exists as an abstract structure, a mathematical relationship between states over time. Like this video, if you're still with me, because we're about to go even deeper. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. This channel is all about exploring the mind-bending ideas of history's greatest thinkers. And trust me, Feynman has more surprises in store. So we've established that consciousness, according to Feynman's understanding of physics and neuroscience, is not located in a place, not unified, not continuous, and possibly not even real in the way we think. It's a pattern, an illusion, a story the brain tells itself. But let's talk about the implications. Because if this is true, it changes everything. Let's start with free will. This is the big one. You feel like you make choices. You feel like you could have done otherwise. When you decide what to eat for breakfast, it feels like you're weighing options and choosing. But if your brain is just neurons following the laws of physics, if your thoughts are just patterns of electrochemical activity determined by prior causes, then where's the freedom? Where's the will? Feynman was a determinist about most things. He believed the universe follows laws. Given the state of the universe at one moment and the laws of physics, the state at the next moment is determined. There's no room for something outside the system to intervene. And your brain is part of the system. So your decisions are determined by the state of your brain, which was determined by prior states, which were determined by prior states, going all the way back. You feel like you're choosing, but the choice was already inevitable given the physical setup. The feeling of free will is the brain experiencing its own deterministic processes and misinterpreting them as freedom. Now, Feynman would complicate this with quantum mechanics. As I mentioned, quantum mechanics introduces genuine randomness. At the level of individual particles, the future is not determined. It's probabilistic. An electron can go left or right, and nothing in the universe determines which it will do. It's fundamentally random. So if your brain depends on quantum processes, and it does to some extent, then your decisions might not be fully determined. They might have a random element, but that doesn't help with free will, because random is not free. If your decision is determined, you didn't freely make it. If your decision is random, you also didn't freely make it. Free will requires that you, the conscious agent, are the source of the decision, separate from both deterministic causes and random quantum events. But as we've seen, there is no you separate from the physical processes. There's just the processes, deterministic and random, and the illusion that someone is choosing. This is uncomfortable. It means that when you do something good, you don't deserve full credit. When you do something bad, you don't deserve full blame. You're not ultimately responsible because you're not ultimately in control. The system is just doing what it does, and you're part of the system, not separate from it. Morally, this is challenging. Legally, it's challenging. Our entire system of justice assumes people make choices and are responsible for them. But if Feynman is right, that assumption is based on an illusion. But here's where it gets even weirder. If consciousness is an illusion, if the self is an illusion, then who is having the illusion? This is the paradox at the heart of Feynman's view. For there to be an illusion, doesn't there need to be someone who's fooled by it? If I tell you the stick in water looks bent but isn't, you're the one seeing the bent stick. There's still a you experiencing the illusion. But if the you is itself the illusion, then what's left? What's experiencing the illusion of being you? Feynman didn't have a fully satisfying answer to this. It's what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains unsolved. But Feynman's approach was to deny the premise. He'd say you're still thinking of consciousness as a thing, as something that needs to exist in order to have experiences. But what if experience doesn't require an experiencer? What if experience is just a property of certain physical systems? When your brain is in certain states, those states have a subjective character. They feel like something. That feeling doesn't require a separate entity to feel it. The feeling is intrinsic to the state itself. Redness feels like redness. Pain feels like pain. The experience and the neural state are not two things, one experiencing the other. They're one thing, described in two different vocabularies. This is called neutral monism, or something close to it. The idea that reality is neither purely physical nor purely mental, but some third thing that can be described in physical terms from the outside and mental terms from the inside. The map is not the territory, but both map and territory are made of the same basic stuff, just organized differently. Your brain states, described objectively by a neuroscientist, are patterns of neural firing. But those same brain states, described subjectively from the inside, are experiences. Qualia, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain. There's no additional entity, no homunculus, no little you sitting in the theater watching the show. There's just the show, and the show includes the feeling that someone is watching it. Let's bring this back to something concrete. GPS satellites have to account for relativity. Time runs slightly faster in orbit than on Earth, because the gravitational field is weaker up there. If we didn't correct for this, GPS would drift out of accuracy by kilometers every day. This is a real, practical consequence of Einstein's relativity, which Feynman helped develop and expand. And one of the implications of relativity is that there's no universal now. Events that are simultaneous for you are not simultaneous for someone moving at a different velocity. Time itself is relative to the observer. So whose now is real? Whose present moment is the actual present? The answer is none of them. They're all equally valid. There's no privileged reference frame. And if there's no absolute now, then the flow of time, the sense that one moment is present and others are past or future, is observer-dependent. It's a feature of your frame of reference, not a feature of the universe. And you, your consciousness, your sense of existing in the present moment, is tied to your reference frame. It's tied to the specific way your brain processes information, the specific sequence of neural states that creates the illusion of time passing. A different observer, moving at a different velocity, would disagree with you about what's happening now. And there's no fact of the matter about who's right. You're both right within your own frames. So the now you're experiencing, the present moment that feels so real and immediate, is not a universal fact. It's a local perspective, an artifact of your particular physical situation and information processing. In a very real sense, your consciousness of the present moment is not experiencing the actual universe. It's experiencing a model constructed by your brain based on delayed, filtered, interpreted sensory information. You're living in a simulation, but the simulator is your own brain. And here's the truly unsettling part. That simulation is always running slightly behind reality. When you see a baseball flying toward you and reach out to catch it, your brain isn't reacting to where the ball is. It's reacting to where the ball was a fraction of a second ago, then predicting where it will be, and commanding your hand to move to that predicted location. Your conscious experience of catching the ball in real time is a post hoc construction. The catching happened before you were aware of deciding to catch it. Your brain backfills the timeline, creates a coherent narrative where you saw, decided, and acted in that order. But the actual order was brain detected, brain acted. Then consciousness was informed and created the feeling that you were in control the whole time. Every single moment of your life works this way. You're perpetually living in the past, experiencing a cleaned-up, edited, delayed broadcast of events that already happened while your brain tells you it's live. The present moment you're experiencing right now already ended before you became conscious of it.